Welcome to Two-Way, everybody. It's Two-Way tonight. Thank you for joining. Lots going on the campaign trail today and analysis of the race. We'll talk all about that. If you're watching on YouTube, welcome. Please, if you engage in activity on the chat, adhere to our belief in peace, love, and understanding and the presumption of grace. If you hear somebody on the program say something you don't agree with, use it as an opportunity to learn, not to lash out or denounce the platform as biased. And if you're watching here on the platform, welcome in. Grateful to have you. If you'd like to get in a question or comment, please raise your hand. Electronic hand. As always, I see new people. We'd love for the new people to be part of it. So if you're new to Two-Way and you want to ask a question or make a comment, raise your electronic hand. We'll have you do that. Okay. Both candidates out campaigning. Donald Trump in Colorado. Aurora, we'll look at some of that. Vice President in Arizona. So I'm going to run through a little bit of their days, show you some stuff from them, give you a few other items. Then we're going to talk a lot about the state of the race and polling. I'm going to walk through my methodology in the spirit of transparency, for which there is a loud clamor on this platform. And then have some guests. We'll take your questions again. Raise your hand if you'd like to get in the conversation. As I said, Donald Trump in Aurora, big rally, raucous. Whenever he goes to a blue place, there are lots of red people. I remember once I was in Oklahoma, and everybody at the event I was speaking at said, it's a red country. This is Republican country and Trump country. And I looked, and Hillary Clinton got a third of the vote in Oklahoma in 2016. That means if you walk down the street and you see three people, one of them voted for Hillary Clinton. If she didn't done a rally in Oklahoma, those people would have turned out. So my point is, when Donald Trump goes to the Bronx or goes to Long Island or goes to Jersey, or today goes to Colorado, there's going to be a big raucous crowd because they're so excited as a non-battleground state to get attention to him, get some attention from a candidate. So the crowd was raucous, and it was normal Trump weave. He talked about a million different things, but his focus was immigration because of what's been happening in Aurora. There's, of course, some dispute about exactly what's happening in Aurora, but there's no doubt that there are some people there who are in the country illegally and are making life uncomfortable, to say the least, for the people who are there legally. And this is all part of an attempt by Donald Trump and the campaign to make as much of the discussion as possible over the final few weeks about immigration. And he knows that if he talks about immigration in a provocative way, it's more likely to be the focus of the news coverage, both in the media market he's appearing and also nationally. So let's look at a little bit of Donald Trump from Aurora today.
I will rescue Aurora and every town that has been invaded and conquered. These towns have been conquered. Explain that to your governor. He doesn't have a clue. They've been conquered. And we will put these vicious and bloodthirsty criminals in jail or kick them out of our country, and we will be very, very effective in doing it. It's going to happen very, very fast. We're going to get them the hell out of our country.
Freeze this when it ends. Leave it up. Freeze it and leave it up. Put it back up if you can.
I will rescue.
Okay. So you can, perfect, right like that. So just a few things. This may be obvious to you all, but he attacked Governor Polis, a Democratic governor of Colorado, who's pretty popular and a pretty moderate governor. He talked about how he worked with him when he was president, but he knows attacking Governor Polis in Colorado is going to get him more news coverage. And then look at the things, the language on the sign behind him. End migrant crime, deport illegals now. Again, he knows what that's going to do. It's a very, very sophisticated guy, and his campaign's very sophisticated. And what they want to do is do everything they can every day to put immigration in the coverage so that that's what voters are hearing about. Very sophisticated, very basic, but Donald Trump and his team are very good at it. And I'll be curious. I'm going to check all the Colorado papers and local news, but I suspect you'll see a lot of coverage of immigration. It's not all he talked about. It was a weave speech. He talked about, I can't remember if he mentioned the late, great Hannibal Lecter, but he talked about a lot besides immigration, but he talked plenty about immigration. Obviously, that was the point of the event. Washington Post is reporting that the Trump campaign is dealing with the Secret Service. And they're saying that he's going to do a lot more events in the next few weeks. And here's the first paragraph. Donald Trump's campaign requested military aircraft for Trump to fly in during the final weeks of the campaign, expanded flight restrictions over his residences and rallies, ballistic glass pre-positioned in 7 battleground states for the campaign's use, and an array of military vehicles to transport Trump, according to emails reviewed by the Washington Post. So, if we didn't live in a polarized, Trumpized world, I think it's pretty obvious, given that it's 2 people tried to kill him and that the Iranians seem to be trying to kill him, and that we don't know the motives of the 2 people who tried. It seems pretty obvious to me that Congress and whoever was president, regardless of the parties, would make these would fulfill these requests, because it would be not just a personal tragedy and a human tragedy if he were killed, but imagine how divided the country would be. These requests, I can't tell you if they're excessive substantively. I just don't know enough about, how much it would cost, et cetera. But they don't seem unreasonable. And certainly if you think it's of American value, regardless if it's Trump or someone else, that one of the major party nominees be allowed to campaign as much as he wants in safety, these seem like reasonable requests to me. But the story in the Washington Post suggests that the administration is not saying immediately, yes, we're going to do these things. Keep watching this, because his safety is at issue, but so is his capacity to campaign. And as nice as his private plane is, it's just not the same. And we know that already there have been Trump events that have been canceled or postponed because of safety considerations. So I think, and again, I try to take out who the candidate is. And if you've got Trump Transition syndrome, you probably think, no, of course he shouldn't get special treatment. And make no mistake, this would be special treatment. But without a doubt, this is something that is going to be treated this will be treated in a way, unfortunately, that will reflect the bitter partisanship and Trump derangement syndrome. These seem like requests that if he thinks he needs these to be able to reach voters and campaign, it seems to me that they should take this quite seriously. Okay, if you're talk to Democrats, including Harris Democrats, and say, why do you think you're going to win this? They'll talk about abortion. They'll talk about the polls being wrong in 2022. They'll talk about the gender gap and more. They'll win with women and more women vote than men. They'll talk about the ground game, and the ground game is they'll talk about money as well, right? They have a huge financial advantage. My view was originally when it was Biden, Trump had a financial advantage, then Biden did, then Trump caught up, then Harris came in and raised $1 billion. I believe now that her financial advantage may be, I won't say dispositive, but may be meaningful. When Trump was outspent in 2016 by Hillary Clinton, said, we have enough. That's what campaigns that are being outraised generally said. We'll have enough to get our message out. I think it's an open question now between their superior state parties in the battleground states, and almost every one, between their doing field in-house as opposed to the Trump campaign outsourcing it, and between their head start of organizing and opening offices and their superior amounts of money, and the fact that the chair of the Harris campaign is an organizer. That's how she made her bones in politics. I believe that if Harris wins, all of that will combine to be part of the story of how she wins. So Trump is still fundraising. And I always think back when I see these presidential candidates and presidents wasting their most valuable campaign asset, their time, flying around the country going to fundraisers. I remember George W. Bush in 2000. He didn't go to a fundraiser. He went to one 1,000-person event in Austin that wasn't a fundraiser. It was a meeting of his fundraisers to tell them, you all are going to raise the money without me. And they also said, no fancy dinners. We're not going to waste money buying everybody a steak. There'll be some peanuts and pretzels. But I can't believe that model has not been adapted. So someone sent me this today, who is a Democrat, who has given one contribution to a friend of his who was a Republican. But somehow he's now on the list. So put up the first thing. There's an email solicitation he got today. It was kind of like a, what do you call those invite things? What do you call that thing? No, what do you call that thing? Where you send invitations through email.
Evite.
Evite, but there's some other thing I'm thinking of. Anyway, he got this by Evite, kind of like a fancy e-invitation. So evening reception with Donald Trump, October 16th. Paperless post. That's what I was thinking of. October 16th. So 5 days from now, Donald Trump is not going to be in Ohio, in Michigan or Pennsylvania, he's going to be at Mar-a-Lago hosting a fundraiser. Next, please. You can see the prices here. $5,000 a person. If you want a photo, it's sold out. $35,000 for a photo, sold out. $250,000 to be a patriot. It's co-chair $1 million, not sold out. Next, please. You can read some of the instructions about this event. Tickets are almost sold out. Remarkable opportunity to meet President Trump live in person, up close and personal. I like that it's both in person and personal. And mingle with other fellow guests, American patriots, blah, blah, blah. Again, you can take it down. My point is, number one, he's still wasting time, quote unquote, wasting time fundraising. And number two, in person. And number two, they're inviting people, as my friend said, bottom of the barrel. Like, this guy's not giving $1 to Donald Trump. And yet somehow they're inviting him, hoping he comes. Okay. Donald Trump announced today he's doing a town hall with Fox News next Tuesday. Harris Faulkner moderating, to be shown Wednesday. I never like holding stuff, so good luck to Fox. All women. I think it's in Georgia. An all-woman town hall. Interesting choice. I don't know if the Trump campaign thought of that at Fox, but very smart. We'll see. Kamala Harris announced today 2 media appearances of her own. On Tuesday, she's taping an interview with Charlemagne the God. Either you know who he is or you don't. Either you know his history. I'll tell you, he's got a history of being critical of Democratic presidential candidates, including sometimes her. So it's an interesting choice, and it'll be interesting to see how confrontational he is, because sometimes he is confrontational with Democratic candidates. So, and he's got a huge following. And she's doing a CNN town hall in Pennsylvania on the 23rd. Okay. Now, she spent part of her day spent all of her day in Arizona. She woke up in Arizona, did some events. She did a weird thing where not weird, but we don't know much about it. She went to a Hispanic-owned restaurant and taped some video content, some digital video content. We don't know what that is. But she also gave a speech. She also did a lot of hurricane stuff, right? So she was on briefing calls and other things with the president to continue to be visible on that. But she gave a speech. And in that event, she said 2 things of note. First thing she said was about forming a bipartisan council of advisors. I'd love to know who thought of this, but can we play that clip? Do we have the clip of her talking about her new bipartisan council of advisors? Let's see.
And I am going to actually announce, we have press in the room, that I have decided also, not only will I have a Republican in my cabinet, but I'm also going to, I was talking to my team about it, I want to create some structure around the following, which is, I love good ideas. Wherever they come from, I love good ideas. Right? And so part of what I intend to do, Mayor, and put some structure around, is creating a bipartisan council of advisors who can then give feedback on policy as we go forward. Because here's the thing I also understand and feel strongly about. In order for us as America to maintain our status as the strongest democracy in the world, we need a healthy 2-party system. We have to have a healthy 2-party system. We have to.
Okay. So
it's in the best.
I don't want to minimize bipartisanship by any means. And I'd like the concept in the abstract bipartisan council of advisors. But first of all, it is to me purely like, almost certainly, I don't want to be cynical, it's almost certainly derivative of a research team or polling team, focus group team saying, people need to see you as more bipartisan. And so, and your message is, you're going to bring the country together and Trump will divide us. So you need something tangible. I'm going to fly to Green Bay tomorrow and walk around a diner and ask people in the diner, what do you think about bipartisan council of advisors? What does that mean to you? I'd be surprised if this means a lot to the real lives of real people. We'll see. The other thing she did is something politicians of both parties do when they're in Arizona, including Kari Lake did it, which is to invoke John McCain. Okay, so let's look at Kamala Harris talking about Senator McCain.
As though it is a sign of weakness to have empathy. In the Senate, well, it was late into the night, and in the Senate, you walk onto the Senate floor, and there are these big wooden ornate doors. And those ornate doors opened. And John McCain came out. He's going after me. And I'm going back after him. I'm going back after him. And that was it. And this is what the public saw. And then I step onto the floor of the well of the Senate later that day. We had votes. And I passed by John McCain. And he looks at me and he says, "Kid, come over here. You're going to make a great senator." True story. True story. True story.
All right. So Megan's with us. Megan, you know how much respect I have for your dad, and this whole community does. And up the words behind her, country over party is what your dad lived, truly. So I'm just wondering what you think of that clip and her invoking your dad. But hold on, I'm sorry, you're muted. I apologize. Go ahead.
Everybody does it on both sides. I'm not thrilled with this because I just find that maybe it did happen. To me, it doesn't sound like him. And I tweeted after I saw it that I'm really just, for me personally, on a personal level, Democrats really want to turn my dad into a progressive liberal that, like, 6 years after his death, he's now just the most liberal progressive that ever existed when he's one of the most conservative senators in American modern history. I think it's because he's still so popular in Arizona even now, and there's data and polling and research that's been done by polling institutes and the McCain Institute that shows that around 14% people in Arizona who are Republicans consider themselves McCain Republicans. So I'm sure that's what she's going for, and those are people who are obviously not Trumpers. I think it's getting to the point of being disrespectful the way everyone is talking about him, because I find so much of it it just doesn't sound like him. And we were obviously incredibly close, and I worked with him both professionally and we were very close personally, and it's hard. I don't like it. And I remember what he actually said about Vice President Harris in private. I actually was like remembering a specific dinner party was something he said, which I don't want to be disrespectful or uncouth and share it right here, but like it just sounds like not real to me.
I'll ask you a question about it. You can pass, of course. Is what she said in characterizing what she claimed was a conversation with your dad that he said you make a great senator, is that consistent with your sense of what he thought of her?
No, not at all. And there's one thing in particular, there's one dinner that I was at with him and some other politicians I can remember very specifically something he said about her. And again, I don't want to like get into some kind of match with the Harris campaign, but I just like, he was not a Democrat. He was so far from it. And her stance on Israel alone would gross him out. So like, and Afghanistan and the economy and the border, like and I also think it's just very strange that like Democrats can't get any other way to prove their bipartisan like bona fides other than bringing up a dead senator. Like, have you done nothing else in your life? You have this like obscure story that I've never heard her say. I've never heard, period. Maybe it did happen. Maybe it didn't. I didn't work with him all the time, but like, I've never heard it before. She never felt the need to share it before, except 24 days before the election in Arizona, when you're, by all intents and purposes, from everything I've heard from you and many other places that's being reported, she's flatlining with independents. So I am sick of it, but I also understand that like politicians are going to politician and they've got to like invoke whatever they can, whatever they can. And on both sides, everybody does it. And it's hilarious because some of the people who are the most cruel to him in life have sainted him in death. So
which remind everybody,
I don't think people are that dumb.
Which members of your family have endorsed Kamala Harris?
My brother Jimmy. That's it officially.
Yeah, that's it. Okay. And is Jimmy campaigning for her?
He just campaigned with Governor Walz. And he told me he's not going to be doing any other events with them.
So as far as you know, he wasn't there today with her.
No, he's not in Arizona right now. He just left.
Okay. I want to talk to you about the race in general. If you can stick with us, I want to run through a few more news of day stuff. But if you're able to stick with us,
up more. This was a last minute booking, and I would have.
That's all right. I'm comfortably dressed. Two ways a come as you are platform. So stay with us. Let me just run through a few more stuff, but thank you for sharing that. All right. I look forward to seeing a national groundswell in support of the bipartisan council of advisors. We go into the weekend with Democrats still worried, as I've been reporting all week, My sources who are spending time with President Trump say he's feeling very good about the race, for what that's worth. And Democrats are worried. And they're worried because they look, contrary to what the Trump campaign or the Harris campaign says, they look at her efforts this week to try to take charge of the race as having failed. Now, again, I'm always for Green Bay diners over what pundits say, always. But it's not just them. It continues to be Democrats working on other races in the battleground states who are worried about the data, okay? Doesn't mean she can't win. It means they don't like where things are sitting right now. And there's this perverse thing going on where she's overperforming what people would have thought in the Sun Belt states, and she's currently underperforming in the Rust Belt. I'm going to talk more about that, but I want to show you what Andrew Sullivan wrote in his Friday column. Andrew Sullivan has written lately that he's voting for Harris because he's voting against Trump, but he wants her to win, and he's unhappy with how she's doing. Headline, he's winning this right now. Can Harris take a risk? Can she break out of this defensive, insecure crouch? Can she borrow just a smidgen of the fierce game Obama was showing last night? I hope so. But this, I fear, is who she is. Reactive, insecure, with no real inner core. And the more you're exposed to her vacuousness, the more the whole fakery of it all sinks in, and the less conceivable she becomes as a president. And I'm not sure I read that right, but you get the point. She has to change that dynamic with something bold and risky, and she has around 3 weeks to do it. So we've seen all week, as we listened to what Democrats have said, do more town halls, give a big speech, propose some stuff, people saying name members of your cabinet, etc. All these things have risk. Now, she did, as I said earlier, say she's going to do a town hall this week. And there are some other things brewing that she may do to try to shake up the race. And Andrew is a very smart guy. He's a very keen observer. He went and watched all her media appearances this week, and he reached the conclusion that others have reached, including a lot of Democrats, super partisan Democrats who don't want Trump to win, that her performance level this week was not good enough. Now, maybe the polls will switch. There are going to be some polls this weekend. CBS has polls coming. It takes a while, right, for the polls to be done. So maybe we won't know till we see polls next week. But if the trend continues to move towards Trump, I think she will be under enormous pressure to try to do things that are larger and perhaps more meaningful to the voters than the bipartisan council of advisors. So this morning on the morning meeting, we talked about 60 Minutes, and I've been getting messages all day from a lot of you saying it's outrageous that 60 Minutes edited the interview the way they did. I'll say again, I'm all for transparency, but the way they edited it was not to help Kamala Harris. It was a tough interview. It's the toughest interview she's faced. They edit to make good television. And yes, that means there's a confluence of interest between the Harris campaign and 60 Minutes. She wants to look smooth and good and like she's giving on-point answers that are easy to understand, and they want that too. But they don't want that in the edit to help her. Donald Trump knows that they edit that way because he said, and others have said, they won't do interviews. I think Newt Gingrich said it last night, won't do interviews with 60 Minutes because they'll edit them, okay? That's what they do. So I'm all for transparency. I'm all for you all understanding how the media works. I think that's great in the age in which we live. I think it's essential. But I continue to tell you, and you know my view on liberal media bias, this is not an example of liberal media bias. Okay. Now, I want to bring that level of transparency to my reporting this week, which has gotten some attention in some quarters. I'm trying to describe what's happening in the race. I'm not rooting for Trump or Harris. I'm rooting for transparency, for understanding, and I'm a competitive reporter. I'm trying to tell people ahead of others what's going on. Okay, what's going on is in what I know is going on is not based on partisanship or favor. It's based on sources in both sides. I'm not saying I'm the only reporter in America with reporters in both parties, but it's increasingly rare. And the benefit of having sources in both parties is the cross-checking super valuable, right? If a really valuable, well-known to me Republican source and a really valuable, well-positioned, well-known to me Democratic source are saying the same thing about what they're seeing in the private polling, that's really valuable. It's more valuable than just having it from one, for sure. And it gives me a greater sense of confidence of what I feel comfortable bringing to you. There's no doubt in my mind that the polling, as I've characterized it this week, is accurate. That right now, Trump would win, and that the numbers are moving in his direction, and that her problems in each individual state with different demographic groups are pronounced, and she'll need to fix with some combination of tactical outreach to black males or union workers, whatever it is, and to a macro solution, like the overwhelming effectiveness of announcing her bipartisan council advisors. I can't stop joking about it because I just find it so ridiculous. Now, as I talk to folks about the race, I'm not locking in. I'm not saying, well, since I reported that the polls were going in his direction, President Trump's direction, that's it. And then I'll stick with that the rest of the way. If it changes, it'll change. When I reported that President Biden was planning to leave the race as early as the coming weekend, I also reported that he did not plan to endorse Kamala Harris. The reason I did was because I had it really well sourced that he didn't. From the time I reported that to the time on Sunday when he got out of the race and then shortly thereafter endorsed her, my reporting is, and I said this, but it's been ignored by my critics, I said he came under enormous pressure when I reported that he wasn't going to endorse her from a lot of people, including very influential women close to the vice president, who said, you've got to endorse her. It'll look horrible if you don't. And he changed his mind. So there was no open convention, as I reported there was going to be, because things changed. In this case, they changed, I think, largely because of what I reported. But my point in telling you that story, besides to see if I can shut up all the criticism of that element of my scoop, is I will change and the story can change. All I can do is tell you in a single moment what's going on based on my reporting. So today, I talked to a Republican pollster who, again, is not a charlatan. He's a real pollster. It's someone I've worked with for decades. I trust him. He's never lied to me, to my knowledge. And I can't tell you the specifics yet, but he told me that one state that the Harris campaign is very keen on winning, of the 7, he said, I know that state really well. I can't tell you how, but trust me, he knows that state really well. And he said, she's not winning that state. Like, forget any public or private poll you see. Now, does it mean he's right that she's definitely not going to win the state? No. But I have confidence in person because I know his history with the state. I know how well he knows the state as a pollster. And I'll say that factors into my view. When I think about her electoral college paths, and many of her electoral college paths include that state, not all of them, but many of them do. And I say, okay, I factor that in. So when I'm thinking about how likely is she to get 270 electoral votes with that state, today I don't think it's very likely. I'll do more reporting on it. I think the chances that person is wrong about that state are de minimis, but they're not zero, and I'll keep reporting on it. And that is what I do. Okay? I don't call up a Trump communications director and say, spin me on your polls. Tell me how great Trump's doing. And I don't just take one side's word for it. If I do, if one side tells me something, I'll say it's that side. I won't muddy it up. Okay? So that's where I believe the race stands tonight. Confidence in Mar-a-Lago, concern in Wilmington, and greater concern amongst Democratic elected officials who I hear from daily, asking me what I know, because they know I know some stuff, and telling me explicitly and through their questions, they are worried. Okay? Doesn't mean she won't win, but that's how we head into the weekend. Okay? Democrats are worried about where things stand. And you see in her media strategy, often you'll see my colleagues say, well, she's doing interviews, that must mean they're panicked. Or Trump's doing a town hall with women, he must be concerned about women. Sometimes it's true and sometimes it's not. It doesn't mean just because they're trying to inspire a constituency or win over undecideds, it doesn't mean they're panicked. It doesn't mean they think they're doomed. They're doing what they're doing to try to win. So we'll all go together step by step. If you want to get in the conversation, please raise your electronic hand. As always, we love new people to be part of it. I want to bring Megan back in to talk about where she thinks the race is and what she thinks is going on. Sorry, what happened there? Here we go. Oh, I know what's happening. I'm doing it and somebody else is doing it. All right, there's Megan.
I saw Newt drinking wine. You might want to bring him in because I like
Newt
the
drinking wine.
Drinking white
If
wine.
Newt wants to come, if Newt wants to come in with or without his wine, he'll raise his hand. I want Alex Castellanos to come in. So Alex, if you turn your camera on, we'd love to bring you in. And there's a couple other people. But Megan, while I bring other folks in, love to hear any reaction you have to Andrew Sullivan or anything else I talked about and how you're feeling about the race as we head into the weekend.
I totally agree with Andrew Sullivan, and I also think you're teasing everyone, but I'm pretty sure you're talking about Pennsylvania. I'm pretty sure. You've not told me.
I got a poker face about it. I'm not
I
going to
know,
say
he
it's
has,
yet.
he has
It's
not
not.
told
It
me.
is or it isn't. Yeah.
It sounds like Pennsylvania to me, and it sounds like Pennsylvania from all the rumors I'm hearing because I live in the Beltway and everybody gossips a lot. I will say, I think her media strategy is insane. I think if you're trying to win over undecided voters, and apparently she has this like huge problem with men, which I don't know if anyone saw President Obama basically lecturing black men yesterday about not coming out for Vice President Harris. The last place I would go is call her daddy and The View and Colbert. It's the last place I would, if I were in charge of her campaign, the last place I would send her. And everything I just keep hearing is that the polling in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin is very bad, that they're very nervous and that the blue wall is not holding. And that's just sometimes like in my experience in life, when there's a lot of smoke, there tends to be a lot of fire. And I just don't think anyone would be as nervous as they seem to be. And I think that she's just a deeply unskilled politician who never in her entire career has had to win over a Republican voter or a center right Republican voter. And she's never been elected to anything having to win over Republicans. And to me, right now, it's showcasing very blatantly that she has not interacted with a lot of real Republicans. The ghost of my dad does not count in this situation.
All right. The thing about President Obama and what some are calling his lecture, big backlash on social media from a lot of African American men who don't like it, and say they're not voting for her because she's a woman. They're not voting for her because they don't like her policies and substantive things. But I'll be curious to see if President Obama keeps that up or not. I'm less critical of it than others because I think they have to shake it up. We talked about this a lot in the morning meeting. They have to shake it up. They have to try to figure out a way to successfully court young black men better than they have going back a year when it was Joe Biden. And I think this intuitively, Professor Obama, as Dan Turrentine said, is not the most attractive version of Barack Obama, but it is different and maybe it'll have more success. Lewis, welcome.
Hi.
I love your microphone.
Thank
sometimes
you.
a microphone is just a microphone. Lewis, introduce yourself to the two-way community. Tell folks where you are, who you are, your orientation towards the campaign, and what you think the state of the race is.
Well, right now I'm in Switzerland, my home country, but I'm a political consultant with academic background in election campaigns. I do a lot of work all over the world, especially in Asia. And I think the reason why I'm here and in other US media is because I wrote the book at the beginning of the year, Beat the Incumbent. And I think that's what brought me into the US media universe.
Yeah. Lewis, do you favor the victory of Donald Trump or Kamala Harris? Are you neutral?
Well, I try to be neutral. I try to hide my personal opinions in all articles. I don't even mention clients in the book. To give you a hint, I don't know a European that would vote for Donald Trump if he could. So take it as a hint.
How about Boris Johnson?
Oh, UK, you still count as Europe. Okay.
Yeah, because
I was thinking of the continent.
You can take a train from London to Paris, so I count it. Lewis, what do you think the state of the race is? Who do you think the favorite is now and why?
Well, I wrote a piece for Newsweek months ago with a title, The Polls Are Close and Meaningless. And what I'm trying to say is that I think we have to live with the fact that this is a close race. And I'm amused how the pundits on CNN and elsewhere zealously discuss changes of a point or two and who is up by 2 points or down by 2 points. No offense, but the US polling market is really skewed or bent. And the polls have been off way more than that 4 years ago and 8 years ago. So I all take this with not a grain of salt, but a lot of salt.
Yeah. So leaving aside the polls, and I don't disagree with you, and I think it's crazy if the poll switches 2 points, they act like it's a basketball game and one side scored a basket. Who do you think the fundamentals of the race favor?
Well, I think it's a very close race. It can go either way. Somehow I have a feeling that Trump doesn't really look and feel like the future to me. And the US, I've known and I've studied there 20 years ago. It's a while ago, but still, the US was always a country that was like going to the future. Somehow, he doesn't really look and feel like the future to me, and didn't use his past record as a basis to make a more compelling vision and agenda for what's next in store if you vote for him.
All right, I'm going to ask you one more question, and I want Alex Castellanos to overview the race for us from his point of view. Lewis, tell me, as best you understand it, Vice President Harris's position on NATO.
Well, I think she would follow probably what Joe Biden did. No, I mean,
How do you know?
I don't know for sure, but that's the impression she leaves, because she can't think of anything she would do differently from Joe Biden. So, and NATO was very important. Actually, he did a great job on NATO. So I don't think that's the first thing she would break away from him.
But you admit we don't know.
We
Right.
we don't know, but
Okay.
I also think.
All right. All those Europeans who want Kamala Harris to win, I'm amazed. They're just for her. They got no idea. They have no idea. Maybe Donald Trump supports NATO, supports a revised NATO. She might be for the abolition of NATO.
Well, that might be
I'm
true.
kidding. I'm kidding.
Wait,
I'm kidding,
but,
of course.
Wait,
but
what they do know is Donald Trump, and they don't know.
Yeah.
They know that they don't like him. And I also
Right.
think that she shouldn't do interviews. She shouldn't fall into the trap of journalists and pundits who always call for specifics. If she's not good at interviews, don't do interviews. Keep the heat on Donald Trump.
Okay. Alex, I want to ask you a question. Alex is a Republican, as everybody knows, but I want to ask you a question. Right now, what would you say is the core negative frame of the Harris campaign on Donald Trump? What is their intended negative frame?
I'm confused by it. I see too many attacks and not focus on their campaign. Is it he's the death of democracy? Is it I mean, I'd say, in fact, it's abortion. That's the only thing that's been consistent throughout.
All right, what if this is their negative frame? We're not going back to everything bad about Donald Trump. Abortion, chaos, January 6th, divisiveness. That to me is their negative frame. Assuming I'm charitably cleaning up the chaos in their messaging. Is that a good negative frame?
If she had a positive campaign that worked, I think that's a very good campaign for them.
Yeah.
I think that's their best shot.
Yeah. And we've talked a lot. Sorry, go ahead.
I think their failure is not on what they've said about Trump, even though they have been, to me, too scattered and not enough focused on the we're not going back and here's why. It's that they haven't defined her.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about defining her, and I want you to address that. But I want to first talk about the Trump negative frame on her. And you early on said it eventually drifts back to liberal, right? Do I have that right?
I think mostly, but liberal is step one. Step two is liberal and lying about it. Therefore, she's inauthentic. We don't know who she is.
Right. Right. So chameleon, fake, cipher. Right. So their thing continues to be, I believe, weak, failed, dangerously liberal. Right. Is that, I continue to believe that may be, that's only 4 words, but it may be 2 words too many. Which is Trump's best frame now? Not which one's he doing, but which is his best in your view? Is it chameleon?
I think I think they've done enough of the liberal that, to me, it's she's sold her soul. She's nothing at all. Because it's what I believe since the start of this thing, and I'm sticking to it, is that voters grow more risk averse as you get closer to the election. And whom you date and love and have fun with is not necessarily who you marry. A lot of voters, I agree with Lewis that the frame about the future is what America's all about. Lift my eyes over the horizon, take me to a better place. And she is doing that better than Trump. But when over half of the population thinks the country's on the wrong track, when people are bleeding to death on the sidewalk, it's hard to sell them the future. Stop it now. Don't hurt me anymore. And that's, to me, sets up the Trump attack on her, which is she's no one at all. She's whomever she needs to be at this moment. She's never explained this evolution. And
Right.
who is she? She is the crazy left around her. She can't be trusted with the most important job, with your future.
Right. Again, if you want to be in the conversation, we're going to your questions and comments soon. Please raise your electronic hand. We've got some hands up. Would love to see more, particularly if it's your first time on the platform. Alex, Donald Trump calls you and he says, Alex, my pollster, Tony Fabrizio, my strategist, Chris LaCivita, my campaign chief, Susie Wiles, they're all telling me it's going great. Everything seems to be great. I need you to, Alex, tell me, what should I be worried about? What might we not be considering? What would you tell President Trump?
I wouldn't answer the phone, but if I did,
he's got his caller ID says Fidel Castro, so you pick up.
I would say that you're making progress, but with a lot of low propensity voters. You're beginning to get some young black men. They're going to show up. Okay, good luck. You're beginning to make progress with Hispanics. Okay, not the highest propensity voters. You're rearranging the electorate. And remember, your ceiling may have bumped up. You have a higher ceiling now, apparently, than you've had before. You've expanded who you are, Elon Musk. And again, you've expanded the perception, not necessarily the machines bringing in more votes with RFK Jr. But you still have a ceiling. And right now, you're enjoying a surge of momentum. But when you stand up, you still hit your head on a ceiling. And it's going to be very close. And remember this, Donald Trump, they've got a machine that might be worth 2 or 3 points in Pennsylvania that you don't have.
Okay, so what would you tell him? So if he said, Alex, what can I do about that? What would you tell him? I know that's not your area of expertise. Too late.
It's too late to build a machine. Therefore, he has to help her disqualify herself. And that is putting on a bunch of ads and a bunch of events, which is what they're doing. Here's one Kamala Harris, here's another Kamala Harris, frick, frack, border, border, and then close it like this with 2 words.
Yeah.
Had enough. Empower voters to make the change. That's the tag I would use to close the campaign. White letters on a blackboard after we see a bunch of Kamala, either flip-flopping or her vacuousness, her inability to complete a thought. And, some of it ought to be on foreign policy because the world is on fire, but some of it is a crisis at home. It doesn't matter where that is. And then right after the had enough, a nice quiet board that says Trump Vance, because I don't want to focus the choice, voters' choice on them. I want to make it had enough about her.
Right. So you have to put the I'm Donald Trump and I approve this message at the top of the ad to avoid it ruining your ending.
I would say at the end, just put up a nice board. Yeah, the less of them, the better.
Yeah. I'll point out that the guy who's made millions of dollars making and selling ads suggests it's too late to put money into field, make more ads.
It's always too late. Yes, that's true.
I'm going to read it from a poll report that just came through from the Harris Traveling Roadshow, and then we're going to take your questions. You can ask Megan and Alex and Lewis anything you want. Lewis can tell you where to eat in Brussels, for instance, so don't pass up the opportunity to get those recommendations. All right, here's the poll report. As I said, she went to a restaurant to film digital content. This is a poll report. Harris emerged from the restaurant at 2:14 p.m. Phoenix time and went straight into her car. Motorcade began rolling at 2:16 p.m. A small number, 5 or 6 by the polls count, of protesters stood outside the restaurant. One held a megaphone, another held a Palestinian flag. It was difficult to make out what they were shouting from inside the press van. Across the street from the restaurant, a truck had a makeshift sign on the windshield, quote, "Fuck Harris," end quote. There's a mural on the side of the building where the restaurant is. It reads in Spanish. I won't try to pronounce it because I don't speak Spanish. "Your vote is your voice." A lot of poetry in that one short poll report. Here we go. David Kelly, I hope you weren't offended. I was just reading the poll report. Don't find me. David, tell folks who don't know where you are, who you're supporting, and then what's on your mind for our great group here. One more time to unmute. There you go.
Sorry. No, you didn't offend me. Actually, I've never heard of that. My question though is, listening to Sean Spicer and Alex and others, I've never seen Sean so giddy about an election. But I still think that abortion is that X
David,
factor.
who are you supporting, David?
Oh, I'm sorry. I live in California. I am supporting Trump. I took a look at I've seen Kamala for well over a decade, so I sort of get it. My concern though with the giddiness of Sean Spicer this morning and previous two-way shows, I think it's caution with the whole. I still think that abortion is an X factor, and I wonder if, as I'm not a political guy, but could the Trump campaign talk about the changes to Title IX as sort of a way to reach women? I don't know if that's how much of a play that is, or if that makes any sense.
Okay, Megan, what do you think of those two related issues about the Trump campaign, women, and maybe talking about Title IX as a possibility?
I think what he's saying about abortion is really important because it is the sort of big question mark, the unknown, because we saw how it played out in the midterm elections, and it was a huge factor in both galvanizing and getting out voters, particularly women voters, obviously, and ultimately bringing in a lot of Democrat wins. So that to me is the wild card in all of this. And young women, especially college educated white women, are extremely motivated to vote in this election. I just know, like, from the other side, from focus groups I've seen from you, Mark, and from other polling and data places, that there's an emotional factor in this, that a lot of women feel like there's going to be a woman president in my lifetime. And that is important to a very significant portion of women, not all women, obviously. When it comes to Title IX, that polls extremely well with the suburban mom vote, the soccer mom vote that Alex coined the term for decades ago, but now we prefer suburban moms over soccer moms. That's because I fit that demographic. It polls extremely well in the sense that women are very worried and concerned about their daughters and playing in sports. I think Democrats really got out over their skis thinking that that this huge culture war issue would be a big winner for them, and that all people sort of feel the way people in Los Angeles and Manhattan do, and it's just not the case. A lot of people will do it quietly, or they don't want to talk about it in public, but they will vote very differently. In my state, Glenn Youngkin ran on it, Governor Glenn Youngkin, and won handily and is extremely popular here. So those two factors are important. I believe the Trump campaign is talking a lot about Title IX. I believe there were ads recently about it because it is a winning issue. So I agree with you, but the abortion question, it's the question. If this is going to turn for her, it will be because of that. I agree with you.
Yeah, I agree. David, thank you. Come back often. Appreciate it. Sue, I don't want to get overly personal, but I believe you're a white college educated woman. Am I right?
White, overly college educated woman.
Yeah.
That's correct.
And Sue, have you ever lived in a suburb?
Oh, I live in a suburb now. I was born in New York City, lived in New York City, lived in the suburbs. I've been in Kansas, Kentucky, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Colorado, North Carolina,
Are you in the witness relocation program?
Only from certain people.
Okay. Sue, tell everybody where you live now and who you're supporting, and then speak for all the white, overly educated suburban women and tell us what you think's going on.
Well, I live in Colorado, and I am a Harris supporter. And Mark, at the beginning of your commentary, you were talking about, Trump is saying these things because he in Aurora, about 45 miles north of Aurora. He's saying those things because he's going to get coverage on the local news. So I have the local news unmuted, and I was looking at that to the NBC local affiliate.
Yeah, you're a two-screen lady.
I am multitasker. 3 times they've come in since 4:00 my time and talked about the rally. They've talked to people who were there on both sides. They have Kyle Clark, who's very highly respected in the area, talk about it. Aurora's 400,000 people, 10 gang members. were associated with this. 9 are under arrest. It's one apartment complex. The coverage is very negative against Trump, saying that it's not true, talking to people who are saying it's not true, talking about how it's very insulting to the people of Colorado, which I agree, saying what you said about the fact that the people that were there at the rally were very excited to be there because they normally wouldn't get to see Trump. And the way I feel about this, and when I talked before, I have family obviously coming from North Carolina. The kind of lies that I'm hearing right now out of Trump, I just find to be disgusting. And I don't know where anybody draws the line. And I get the Trump supporters will say, we know who he is, we don't like him, but we're voting for his policies. They give him credit for 2017 to 2019. He handed off, to use a technical term, an economy that was in the toilet when Biden took over. And they give Biden all the blame for that. And the economist you had on a couple of days ago had said, whoever wins in 2025 is going to get a really great economy. So, obviously, if we have the best economy in the world, and maybe Lewis can talk about this. We have broken the back of inflation through higher interest rates, and most of Europe and the rest of the world did not come out of this as well as we have. You give Trump credit for an economy he inherited. You give Biden blame for economy that he inherited. We're doing better than the rest of the world. We're finally maybe getting to the point where we can see the horizon. They must have done something right. So
well said.
I don't know. The lies
yeah.
are just too much for me. Just
Yeah.
way too much. It's hurting people.
Yeah. So let me say regarding the coverage, and thank you for summarizing the coverage. Michael Deaver, who worked for President Reagan, would say he didn't care what they said on television. They just liked the pictures because that's what most voters were going to see. So I'd be curious to see if all the coverage is negative, but I also bet that a lot of people are just going to see Donald Trump came to Colorado and talked about immigration and not the facts of what's on the ground in Aurora. And I bet that illegal immigration is not very popular in Colorado. I bet on those things.
I don't hear anybody talking about immigration as an issue. Even the Trump supporters that I know, and I know a lot, I know MAGAs who think the election was stolen, and the women in Georgia were hauling out suitcases full of ballots. Who call me ignorant and naive.
Sue, one more question for you, and then I'd like you to ask a question of Speaker Gingrich or anybody else, as he's joined us now, and then maybe folks will have questions for you. How are you feeling about the vice president's campaign right now? Are you worried about her chances? Are you still confident? How are you feeling about things?
I don't think I was ever totally confident. I always thought it was going to be a very close race. I have a lot of friends who are not looking anywhere but blue media, and were surprised when we had a conversation the other day that, she might lose this. They don't understand how that might happen. I don't think that Trump will win the popular vote. I don't think there's any chance that will happen. He could win the Electoral College, and then we're back to where we have been with every Republican president in decades, that they win the Electoral College, but they don't have the support of the majority of Americans.
Right. So do you have a question, or can the panel ask you questions?
They can ask me whatever they like.
All right. Anybody want to ask Sue a question, or a correspondent in Colorado? If not, Sue, or Alex, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Has the footage of the gangs going into the apartment buildings, has that been running on the news?
No, it was one incident. And the thing that you have to understand about that, and it is one apartment complex in a city of 400,000 people, where it was mostly an issue with the landlord. It was not gang members. There's one video, and that was it. And even if you talk to the people who live in that apartment complex, and they've been on the news a lot, they don't see it as a gang issue. It was the slum landlord that was there.
Only thing I would point out before I run while dinner's hot is that the establishment seldom admits things are not going great. And there is a huge wave of populist anti-establishment sentiment out there. And 50 million Frenchmen are wrong doesn't make the best campaign. This campaign's about strength for a reason. That's what you have. Could you imagine a few years ago, young Black Americans telling Barack Obama to go stuff it, quit telling them what to do? That's breakthrough stuff. That's a major. Why is that happening? When young Black men are who have been on the outsiders all their life now see a former Black president as an insider and a threat to their independence and strength and manliness.
I
change.
have two 20-somethings, a 24-year-old and a 22-year-old. For various reasons, my 24-year-old son is finding it very difficult to find a job in North Carolina, and there's reasons for that. My daughter just graduated from college, and she and her friends are saying, we'll never own a house, we'll never have this, we'll never have that. So I get that young people feel that way, but I don't really believe that anything that Donald Trump could do would help that, because his policies are inflationary. And I look at it as the 4 years that he was in office, including COVID, were extremely stressful. In COVID, I was told basically to stay home and wondered if I'd ever get out of my house. The quality of my life now is so much better. I don't care. Now I can go to the grocery store and fill up a cart with all the toilet paper I want, all the food that I wanted. I could not do that in 2020. I'm paying $2.79 for a gallon of gas versus $1.86, but I can go watch my daughter play volleyball. I couldn't do that before.
Sue, thank you. Thank you, Sue. We're grateful for you, all that. Thank you so much. Alex, enjoy dinner. Mr. Speaker, thank you for joining. I'd love to hear your comments on any and all of what we've been discussing.
Well, I was wavering. First of all, I loved Megan's comments, and I thought she was exactly on point. And having served with her father at length, that story didn't quite sound like the John McCain I served with, but I wasn't going to.
One thing, it's not how he talks either.
That's what I mean. It's just it wasn't the right rhythm,
Yeah.
But it may have been a guy she met one time, and she wasn't sure what his name was, but it was nice comments. Anyway, but I was tempted not to do this, but as you know, I bit my tongue once or twice last night on some comments. But I thought I would point out to Louis, and I hope he doesn't mind my saying this pretty directly. If you don't know any Europeans who would vote for Trump, you represent exactly the people who are losing control of their countries. I have a hunch that Marie Le Pen would probably vote for Trump. I have a hunch that the head of Hungary would vote for Trump. I have a hunch that the people who just won in Austria would vote for Trump. I have a hunch that the leading party in the Netherlands would vote for Trump. The idea that all Europeans...
I made a point, Speaker. I was making a point. But good to see you again since the time we met on your podcast.
Yes, I was going to say, I'm just pointing out for the audience that, in fact, there are a substantial and growing number of Europeans who are in rebellion against their establishments. I thought that the lady who came in from Aurora, first of all, she had courage, and I'm glad she joined. I think it's exactly the spirit, Mark, of what you want. And she raises a good question. You have the same thing happening in Ohio, which is that, and I don't quite know how to say this right. It's almost like learning how to write literature. There are truths that are larger than the facts that may or may not validate them. It is a truth for most Americans that 10 to 20 million illegal immigrants is unacceptable. It's a truth for most Americans that having a prison gang from Venezuela in a substantial number of American cities is unacceptable. And one of the things that drove the establishment crazy about Trump in 2016 and still drives him crazy is he has a knack for understanding the larger truths without fully understanding the smaller truths. The last great Republican leader to do that, of course, was Ronald Wilson Reagan, who fairly often had a larger vision. People applauded, while the specific details, I remember in his inaugural address, he described this wonderful story of a young man who lost his life in World War I and was buried across the river in Arlington. And by the next morning, the Washington Post pointed out the man was actually buried in Wisconsin and not in Arlington. Now, the number of Reagan supporters who thought that was terrible was zero. And I just think that's what
But I have to say a difference between how Reagan messed up facts and Donald Trump's messed up facts, which is Donald Trump's messed up facts are often divisive, they're often ostracizing, they're often negative in a way that makes the left crazy, not just because he's successful and he's talking about larger truths that have great following. But when you say Haitians are eating dogs, that's not a cute story with a few facts wrong.
Right.
It's false, and it's inflammatory.
Look, I know I'm much older than you, so you might not be aware of this. But there was a point where Reagan was in the Central Valley talking about Berkeley. And the direct quote is, if there has to be bloodshed, I say, bring it on.
Yeah.
There was a Reagan who was fully as divisive as Trump. Now, that was years ago, and we can now love him because he's not here. And I have no idea what the Trump mythology will be 30 years from now. My only point is, Donald Trump didn't survive everything that's been done to him and didn't take total control of his party for all practical purposes, and isn't currently probably more likely to win than lose because he somehow failed to observe the establishment's vision of an appropriate level of speech. He is tapping into a country so angry, so fed up, and so eager to have change that's what led those young men, which actually is a great tribute. We're beyond racial matters when young blacks can say to the first black president, get off my back, I don't agree with you. In a way, that's a wonderful moment. And the truth is, and somebody just made a comment that said I was a bomb thrower in my day, and I proudly will tell them I was a Reaganite. I learned how to throw bombs from Ronnie, and I've done the best I could my entire career, as you know, because you covered it. So I just, my hunch is that probably Trump will win. My hunch is that when he does win, it will lead us to a wild ride of historic proportions, and that you are set now to have a topic of conversation for at least the next 5 or 6 years in a way that every single day will give you something to talk about.
What would your answer be to my question I asked Alex is, what would you be worried about if you were the Trump campaign, which is feeling pretty good right now?
One, whether or not, for example, this I think is very interesting. If you have younger black males in Philadelphia for Trump, it's probably harder to steal votes because they no longer have unified precincts. I worry about the service employees unions capacity in nursing homes to help vote for people who have Alzheimer's and otherwise incapacitated. So in that sense, that's part of the Democratic machine. I said back in 1973 in the Atlanta Constitution, Republicans have to win by 4% in order to overcome the theft. And I'll stick with that. But I think also there's a momentum now. I frankly worry the most about what you said early on. We have now been told publicly that the Iranian government is officially trying to kill one of the 2 Republican presidential candidates. And we've been told apparently by both the New York Times and the Post that Joe Biden doesn't want to provide the appropriate security. Now, I find that frankly terrifying. And I think the consequences of that neglect could be historic on a scale we can't even imagine. Yeah. And I hope President Biden will decide that he needs to do the prudent thing, and that is provide whatever level of protection. Because now you're talking about state-sponsored terror, not talking about some kid with a rifle. You're talking about professional trained teams trying to get even for what Trump did to the head of the IRGC. Frankly, that worries me more than any other single thing from now, not just the election, from now to the inauguration.
And I consider it to be election interference if they don't allow one of the major party nominees to campaign on the pace he wants and doing the kind of events he wants to do. I just don't think that's even a close call. It's not a matter of money. It's not a matter of precedent. If there's threats against the life of one of the nominees, and he says, for me to campaign the way I want to in the last 3 weeks, I need extra stuff. We need to do that. I just don't think it's a close call.
And I don't see how Biden can live with himself if he puts a Republican, a national figure, in danger of being killed by a foreign dictatorship. And as of tonight,
or anybody else.
Well, but in particular, I wasn't all that worried about random nutcakes. A good friend of mine who does a lot of work with the special forces and with intelligence came to me yesterday and said, when you think of the Iranians, you're in a different world and you need a radically deeper level of defense. And that probably includes special forces who can stop drones.
Yeah. I only bring up the two who tried because they tried and we don't know what their motives were and we don't know what connections they have. Yeah. President Trump on a podcast the other day said, I don't know if it's true, but he said the government has still not gotten access to their phones to understand who they were communicating with. And I mean, it's bizarre that Joe Biden, those two guys.
Enormously. I mean, Biden is running the risk both of tearing the country apart and of having his legacy be the man who allowed the Iranian dictatorship to kill an American leader. And they ought to, by tomorrow morning, totally change their position.
I agree with that.
That worries me more than anything else in the campaign.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, thank you. Megan, thank you for sharing what you did. Lewis, thank you. Hope you come back. Sue, thank you. And others who got to ask questions. We're going to stop now. It's Friday. We're over time. As I said, Megan, again, thank you. There are going to be polls this weekend. So we'll have those. Might have specials over the weekend if there's breaking news. But otherwise, we'll see you Monday morning, 9 a.m. morning meeting. Sean, Dan, and I will review the polls that come out over the weekend, and we'll talk about the week ahead. Very grateful to you all for being part of the community, and we'll see you again right here on Monday, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Thank you.